Hello everyone, welcome back to the brewery. We are just getting started on a new brew today, and I wanted to bring you along for a new process that I have in the brewery. It's sort of a hybrid RIMS brewing technique, or RIMS mash. I think what RIMS stands for is recirculation, infusion, mash, yada yada yada. But in simple terms, what we're doing is it's cold out, it's wintertime, and I'm brewing in the garage, and my mash is typically 60 minutes. Today it's actually 75 minutes, so even longer. And the challenge is you want to maintain your mash temperature for the entirety of that amount of time if possible. And so I was struggling for a while. I would heat up my water, and you can't leave the heat on in a controlled way with a propane burner. So I would turn the heat off, come and check it in a half an hour, and it would have dropped like 10 degrees or so. And I'd have to pull the bag out, reheat it a little bit, put the bag back in. I even tried wrapping it with, you'll see my wrap here in a minute, and it just can't be done very well. So what RIMS does is it uses what they call a RIMS tube. This is something that I assembled with some parts from Brewers Hardware. Love Brewers Hardware. What this has in it is a 120 volt heating element, similar to like a water heater element, something like that. Plugs in with a nice heavy cord, and then it's two sections of tri-clamp tubing with an in and an out. You can see on the right and the left I have a cam lock, because that's what my hoses are, a cam lock style in and an out. And then in one end here we have a thermo well, which is just a hole that allows me to put a temperature probe in. So what this does is it hooks up in line, and I'll show you that here, with my kettle, and while I'm mashing I actually run a pump and recirculate that mash through the heating element attached to a temperature controller set for the temperature I want to maintain during my mash. So today we'll dial that into 150. Our mash is 150, so a touch low on our Belgian quad that we're doing today. And we're going to set the timer for 75 minutes, and it will be able to maintain that temperature exactly for that whole time. So I'll try and set you up a little higher so you can see what's happening as I set this up, and show you how it all works. Okay, so here we go. We need to definitely cut our heat. Our heat got a little high. This is simply my strike water though, and what that is the water we're heating up before we mash. So there's nothing happening yet. It doesn't make any difference what temperature this is. So I'm going to let that cool down a little bit. What we're going to do is put our grain bag in, and we'll set everything else up while we're waiting for the water to cool. I modified my grain bag and added this little cutout, and you'll see why that's important here in a second. Let me actually zoom you in a little bit. Everything is, oh, I can't zoom. Everything's reflecting off of the stainless, so I apologize for that. I'm working to improve things for your viewing enjoyment. So this hole here lines up with this port that I installed, also from Brewers Hardware, and we'll do a kind of a more specific video on that in the future. Set my lid aside. So we'll just line that up. Perfect. Okay, next we want the outlet of our kettle down here at the bottom. Here, I'll do this. Maybe that'll help for a little while. We want the outlet of our kettle down at the bottom here to run to the inlet of our pump. And I actually use this stool to set my pump on so that it's down below. I'll go back on with that. Down below the outlet. Pull this out. Then we'll take the outlet of the pump and go to the inlet of the rims tube that I have setting up here. If this light was not shining directly on it, you'd be able to see it. You always want to make sure that your pump is ahead of your rims tube, because you don't want to risk starving this heating element for flow. If you do that, it's going to heat up very fast and be sort of dangerous. So you want to make sure that your pump is feeding the tube at all times. You can always slow down the flow after the rims tube, but you don't want to starve the rims tube. And finally, we'll connect the outlet of the tube to the inlet of the kettle. Now I'm going to bring you in close and show you an attachment we're going to put on our kettle. So there are two attachments that work with this setup. One is called a Vorloff Arm, which I don't necessarily need at this point because I'm using Brew in a bag and not a 3-vessel system where this would make more sense. But for now, we're going to go ahead and use it. Then we'll switch over to our recirculation manifold in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and wet the O-rings there to make sure they slide into this bulkhead. And this is threaded, so we can go ahead and tighten down our arm. Just like that. Next, we'll dump in our 20 pounds for this Belgian quad. 20 pounds of grain. Our recommended strike water temp was 163, and we're just below 170, so I think we'll be okay. In my past videos, I've talked about making sure that you dump the grain in slowly while stirring, have a friend stir if possible, and I've kind of gotten away from that. I've gotten to where I just dump it all in and then mash it up real good and make sure I don't have any dough balls. I'll get this mashed up and show you the recirculation here in a sec. Okay, so we've got everything broken up and mixed in pretty good. Now what we're going to do is wrap the kettle. I'll show you the wrap I use. I think I talked about this on a previous video. This is a form of home insulation, and I've cut it out to fit my kettle, and this just helps to keep everything that much warmer. Okay, so we've got that on, and we will put the lid on eventually, but I'm going to leave it off to show you how everything works here. So now I'm going to take my temperature probe. I'm actually going to rob the one from my Keyser because I'm one short. I need to buy another probe. And we'll set the temp to our mash temp, and then plug in the, well, turn on the pump first, then plug in the rims tube. Okay, so we've got our temperature controller set to 150, which is our desired mash temp. Open the valve here on the kettle, open the valve on our pump, and we'll turn on the pump. So now this is recirculating through the rims and back up off of our Vorloff arm. Now that we're sure it's circulating, we can go ahead and plug this in and see how our temperature is looking. With using a rims tube, you want to make sure there's nothing too close. I should probably move these papers, to be honest, because this is very hot. So we'll just let this recirculate for a second. You can see we're going to exceed our temperature because our water got a little bit too hot earlier. So just then, there was a click and the heating element shut off. And when this falls back down, I'll turn the video back on and show you how it turns back on and heats itself up. Meanwhile, I'm going to get the lid on here, and after about 5 minutes with the Vorloff, we're going to switch to the recirc manifold. Our recirculation manifold is just this kind of spider web here, and what it does is just allows the mash water or wort to just dribble out of there, and that's just what we want. Just a nice gentle dribble coming out and kind of landing on top of the grain bed. We don't want to be disrupting that grain bed at all, so that's just going to sit in there for the next 65 or 70 minutes now, and we'll come back and move on to our boil. So that's basically it for the introduction of the rims tube and how it works, what it does. I'll do a more detailed sort of assembly and parts video on what it took to put that together, but otherwise, thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe as always, and I'll see you on the next video.